High above the city, on a tall column, stood the statue of the happy prince. He was covered with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes, he had 2 bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed on his sword hilt. One night there flew over the city a little swallow. His friends had gone away to Egypt 6 weeks before, but he had stayed behind. After they were gone, he felt lonely, so he decided to go to Egypt too. All day long he flew, and by night he arrived in the city. "Where shall I put up?" he said. "I hope the town has made preparations." Then he saw the statue on the tall column. "I will put up there," he cried. "It is a fine position with plenty of fresh air." So he alighted just between the feet of the happy prince. "I have a golden bedroom," he said softly to himself as he looked round, and he prepared to go to sleep. But just as he was putting his head under his wing, a large drop of water fell on him. "What a curious thing!" he cried. "There is not a single cloud in the sky. The stars are quite clear and bright, and yet it is raining. The climate in the north of Europe is really dreadful." Then another drop fell. "What is the use of a statue when it cannot keep the rain off?" he said. "I must look for a good chimney pot." And he determined to fly away. But before he had opened his wings, a third drop fell, and he looked up and saw. Ah! What did he see? The eyes of the happy prince were filled with tears, and tears were running down his golden cheeks. His face was so beautiful in the moonlight that the little swallow was filled with pity. "Who are you?" he said.
"I am the happy prince."
"Why are you weeping then?" asked the swallow. "You have quite drenched me."
"When I was alive and had a human heart," answered the statue, "I did not know what tears were, for I lived in the palace, where sorrow is not allowed to enter. I played with my companions in the garden. Round the garden ran a very lofty wall, but I never cared to ask what lay outside. My courtiers called me the happy prince, and happy indeed I was. After I died, they set me up here so high that I can see all the ugliness and all the misery of my city. And though my heart is made of lead, yet I cannot choose but weep."
"What? Is he not solid gold?" said the swallow to himself. He was too polite to make any personal remarks out loud.
"Far away," continued the statue in a low voice, "in a little street there is a poor house. One of the windows is open, and through it I can see a woman seated at a table. Her face is thin and worn, and she has coarse, red hands, all pricked by the needle, for she is a seamstress. She is embroidering passion flowers on a satin gown for the loveliest of the queen's maids of honor, to wear at the next court ball. In a bed in the corner of the room, her little boy is lying ill. He has fever and is asking for oranges. His mother has nothing to give him but river water, so he is crying. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you not bring her ruby out of my sword hilt? My feet are fastened to this pedestal, and I cannot move.
I am waited for in Egypt, said the swallow. My friends are flying up and down the Nile and talking to the large lotus flowers. Soon they will go to sleep.
Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, will you not stay with me for one night and be my messenger? The boy is so thirsty and the mother so sad.
I don't think I like boys, answered the swallow. They were always throwing stones at me, and I have to go to Egypt. But the happy prince looked so sad that the little swallow was sorry. It is very cold here, he said, but I will stay with you for one night and be your messenger.
Thank you, little swallow, said the prince.
So the swallow picked out the great ruby from the prince's sword and flew away with it in its beak over the roofs of the town. He passed over the river. At last he came to the poor house and looked in. The boy was tossing feverishly on the bed, and the mother had fallen asleep. She was so tired. In he hopped and laid the great ruby on the table beside the woman. Then he flew gently round the bed, fanning the boy's forehead with his little wings.
How cool I feel, said the boy. I must be getting better. And he slept peacefully.
Then the swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him what he had done. It is curious, he remarked, but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold.
That is because you have done a good action,
said the prince. The little swallow began to think, and then he fell asleep. When day broke, he flew down to the river and had a bath. Tonight I go to Egypt, said the swallow, when the moon rose. Have you any commissions for Egypt? He cried. I am just starting.
Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Will you not stay with me one night longer?
I am waited for in Egypt, answered the swallow.
Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Far away across the city, I see a young man in a garret. He is leaning over a desk covered with papers. He is trying to finish a play for the director of the theater, but he is too cold to write, and hunger has made him faint.
I will wait with you one night longer, said the swallow, who really had a good heart. Shall I take him another ruby?
Alas, I have no ruby now, said the prince. My eyes are all that I have left. They are made of rare sapphires. Pluck out one of them and take it to him. He will sell it to the jeweler and buy food and firewood and finish his play.
Dear prince, said the swallow, I cannot do that. And he began to weep.
Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Do as I command you.
So the swallow plucked out the prince's eye and flew away to the student's garret. It was easy to get in, as there was a hole in the roof. The young man had his head buried in his hands, and when he looked up, he found the beautiful sapphire lying on the table.
I am beginning to be appreciated,
he cried.
This is from some great admirer. Now I can finish my play.
And he looked happy.
The next day, the swallow flew around. When the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince. "I am come to bid you goodbye," he cried.
"Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince. "Will you not stay with me one night longer?"
"It is winter," answered the swallow, "and the chilly snow will soon be here. In Egypt the sun is warm. Dear prince, I must leave you, but I will never forget you, and next spring I will bring you back 2 beautiful jewels in place of those you have given away."
"In the square below," said the happy prince, "there stands a little match girl. She has let her matches fall in the gutter, and they are all spoiled. Her father will beat her if he does not bring home some money, and she is crying. She has no shoes or stockings, and her little head is bare. Pluck out my other eye and give it to her, and her father will not beat her."
"I will stay with you one night longer," said the swallow, "but I cannot pluck out your eye. You would be quite blind then."
"Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince. "Do as I command you."
So he plucked out the prince's other eye and darted down with it. He slipped the jewel into the palm of the match girl's hand.
"What a lovely bit of glass!"
cried the little girl, and she ran home laughing. Then the swallow came back to the prince. "You are blind now," he said. "I will stay with you always."
"No, little swallow," said the poor prince. "You must go away to Egypt,"
said the swallow, and he slept at the prince's feet. All the next day he sat on the prince's shoulder and told him stories of what he had seen in strange lands.
"Dear little swallow," said the prince, "you tell me of marvelous things, but more marvelous than anything is the suffering of men and of women. Fly over my city, little swallow, and tell me what you see there."
So the swallow flew over the great city and saw the rich making merrily in their beautiful houses, while the beggars were sitting at the gates. He saw the faces of starving children on the streets. Under the archway of a bridge, 2 little boys were lying in one another's arms to try to keep themselves warm. "How hungry we are," they said. "You must not lie here," shouted the watchman, and they went out into the rain. Then he flew back and told the prince what he had seen.
"I am covered with fine gold," said the prince. "You must take it off, leaf by leaf, and give it to my poor."
Leaf after leaf of the fine gold the swallow picked off, till the happy prince looked quite dull and grey. He gave it to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier, and they laughed and played games in the street. "We have bread now," they cried. Then the snow came, and then the frost. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince. But at last he knew that he was going to die. "Goodbye, dear prince," he murmured.
"I am glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow," said the prince. "You have stayed too long here."
"It is not to Egypt that I am going," said the swallow. "I am going to the house of death." And he kissed the happy prince and fell down dead at his feet. At that moment, a curious crack sound inside the statue, as if something had broken. The laden heart had snapped right in two. Early the next morning, The mayor was walking in the square below in company with the town councillors. As they passed the column, he looked up at the statue. "Dear me, how shabby the happy prince looks," he said.
How shabby indeed!
Cried the town councillors. "In fact," said the mayor, "he is no better than a beggar, and there is a dead bird at his feet." So they pulled down the statue of the happy prince. Then they melted the statue in a furnace. "What a strange thing," said the workmen at the foundry. "This broken lead heart will not melt in the furnace. We must throw it away." So they threw it on a dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. "Bring me the two most precious things in the city," said God to one of his angels, and the angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. "You have rightly chosen," said God. "For in my garden of paradise this little bird shall sing forever, and in my city of gold the happy prince shall always praise me."